أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المظلومين الغرر الميامين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة غريب يا يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته وعونه ودعاءه وخيره ورضاه ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك يا كريم. For the hastily, the reappearance of the Master, the Savior, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, recite a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last night we talked about one of the single most important and pivotal institutions in the final revelation of God to His creations. The religion of Islam considers the institution of marriage to be the most important and the most monumental and the most significant and the most impactful on everything else. You find that good, stable, moral families and marriages are the genesis of a good society. And these values that Islam espouses, values such as honesty, integrity, piety, hard work, education, all these things would be next to impossible if the institution of marriage is unstable and if the family structure is not where it should be. And I also mentioned some things that perhaps some people found controversial or a little difficult to digest. And that's natural, that's normal. First of all, because I did say that I would want you all to be disruptors of erroneous social norms and customs. And so naturally, I also consider myself to be a bit of a rebel, a bit of a disruptor, if you like. And so if there is a conversation, even a heated conversation that takes place at the conclusion of these discussions, then I welcome them. And also, because I think it's important you realize that if there is any discussion of this kind that you find to be out of the ordinary or incompatible with our modern lifestyles, well, it's not my fault, so don't shoot the messenger. At the end of the day, what I try to do is not to provide my own opinions and views and analysis. What I strive to do is to convey a message that was passed down from God and the prophets and the Imams to the scholars and the knowledgeable, learned jurists, and at the very end of that chain, yours truly, this insignificant servant of Imam al-Hussain and his lovers. And so there's really no reason to shoot the messenger, or really shoot anybody, really. We don't want anyone shooting anyone. What we do want is a healthy debate, a discussion about those prevalent cultural traits that we have adopted and have become so ingrained in our psyche that it's almost impossible for us to shed those values. As I said, bring up subjects like procreation, early marriage, having more children than the so-called nuclear family, and sit back and observe the almost universal condemnation. To espouse these core Islamic values in this day and age is almost like speaking a foreign language. People will be split into two camps. Either they will become angry or they will look confused and bewildered. And it's also natural that you hear people say, well, back in those days, this might have been valid, this might have been applicable, but not now. As if the good examples, the successful individuals who get married in this day and age don't count. As if there is no other religious community that also encourages early marriage, also has lots and lots of children, and we're the only ones who are forced into this life of misery. You have to admire, brothers and sisters, the fact that you look at communities like the Jewish community, especially the Orthodox community, the Catholics across the world, who are applying these teachings right here, right now. We're not talking about the 1950s and 60s. We're not talking about the pre-liberation movements. We're not talking about the Dark Ages. We're not talking about the time of the prophets and the Imams. We're talking about Orthodox Hasidic Jews in cities like New York and Los Angeles and Boston and elsewhere, who are having lots of children and somehow making it work. Not only making it work, but being much more prosperous than the rest of society. Being much happier than other people. Their communities becoming stronger and better as a result of that. This isn't back in those days. This is right here, right now. How are the Catholics doing it? Where even one minivan is not enough to transport the family here and there, they have to get two. How are they making it work? Are they better than us? Do they have a special relationship with God that somehow allows them to prosper in spite of having 6 or 7 children? My point is this, brothers and sisters. Let's challenge ourselves. Let's challenge what we've been fed by pop culture, by society at large. And I'm not even talking about like American society. Societies in general in this day and age, they've all adopted this attitude that, oh no, it's impossible, you gotta have, and again, they try to employ logic. I'm not judging anyone who feels this way. They actually try to employ things like basic mathematics and say, well, if you have only 2 children, then surely your cost of living is going to be less than having 4 children. But what this formula lacks, what these equations and these logical fallacies miss, is the fact that there are things in life which we as believers, we as people who have submitted ourselves to the will of God, people who already believe in things that are not strictly supported by mathematics and physics. How can you physically prove the existence of the soul? How can you physically establish the existence of heaven and hell? And yet you believe in all of those things because it's a package deal. When you believe in the Prophet, when you believe in the Quran, when you believe in the Ahlul Bayt, then you also believe in what we call ilmul ghayb. You believe in a world that is unseen to you. The fact that we have all boarded the ark of Imam al-Hussain, the fact that we truly believe in Imam al-Hussain, there's a big difference between you and, say, a Christian who writes about Imam al-Hussain, or a Christian who visits the shrine of Imam al-Hussain. And there are many of them who do that. May God bless them. The Quran even praises those monks and priests who submit themselves to the truth and cry when they hear the verses of Allah. But the difference between you and them is that to you, Imam al-Hussain isn't just a tragic story. To you, Imam al-Hussain is God's emissary who was brutally massacred. To you, Imam al-Hussain is the ark of salvation, the lantern of guidance, the grandson of God's final prophet, the seal of messengers, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And so, you've decided to board this ark instead of letting yourself drown in the ocean of desires, temptations, and all the plethora, the infinite ways that could lead us to self-destruction. You've decided to connect with Imam al-Hussain because you believe in him. Not just because you feel for him, you believe in him. And so the example set by Imam al-Hussain should, and I have no doubt, matters to you. It matters to you what Imam al-Hussain said. It matters what he did. It matters that Imam al-Hussain prayed Salatul Dhuhr on the day of Ashura and lost at least 2 of his most loyal companions for the sake of Salah. It matters to you that Imam al-Hussain was in fact prevented from praying Salatul Asr on the day of Ashura and was murdered before he could do so. It matters to you that Zainab was protective of her sanctity and her chastity and her hijab. It matters to you that Imam al-Hussein's singular concern on the day of Ashura was that the men would not violate that sanctity and chastity of his camp. It matters to you that Imam al-Hussain would in fact quench the thirst of an enemy combatant who himself says that after Imam al-Hussain came to me and fed me and gave me the water while I was thirsty and dying of thirst, the very next day on the day of Ashura, I was one of the people who trampled upon the body of Hussain. These things matter to you because you consider yourself to be a follower, a partisan, a Shia of Ali ibn Abi Talib, a Shia of Imam al-Hasan and al-Hussain and the other members of the Ahlul Bayt. May Allah bless you for that. These things matter. And because they matter, then you have to ask yourself, how did the Ahlul Bayt live their lives? What did they do? Nothing else matters. What did Imam al Hussain do? I want to walk in his footsteps. So if Imam al Hussain not only practiced early marriage and having lots and lots of children without really putting a cap and a barrier in the face of your own rizq and sustenance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Imam al-Hussain also espoused this value and preached it and talked about it and practiced it in the lives of his own children, that should matter. Brothers and sisters, look at the world we're living in today. I'll just give you one example and move on. You remember at the G7 just a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago or less maybe, the G7 summit, the Group of Seven summit, which was held in France. The leaders of the world's, some of the world's greatest economies and democracies and countries, they went over there to discuss matters of importance and matters of significance that affect us all, right? That's the whole point. It's a roundtable discussion. At the same time, you also remember that the Amazon jungle was on fire. And the Amazon is colloquially referred to as the planet's lungs, because apparently 20% of the oxygen that is produced around the earth is produced in the Amazon jungle. So how important is this jungle? Very important. So because the fire was raging, and because the French president was saying that this is at the top of our priorities, and because everybody was talking about this, and they should, the Group of Seven leaders got together and pledged a very big, hefty support package for the Brazilian government so that they can combat these fires and bring them under control. How much did they pledge for that purpose? $20 million. Wow, that's a huge amount. 20 million to save the planet's lungs. Now, to put that into perspective, Netflix produced a series. They spent $100 million on a streaming service to produce a series on Netflix. 100 million. Do you know what that tells us? What that tells us is that everybody's trying to get a piece of you. Everybody's trying to get you to convert, to get you to dedicate your time and your thought process and to establish your values and your principles based on their values and principles, right? A single cartoon is made, I don't want to mention names here, but an animation is made and they spend $260 million on it. Why do you think that's done? Of course it's to profit, it's to make a profit. Of course it's for entertainment and notoriety and call it what you will. But part of it is to espouse and indoctrinate and spread a certain set of values. Good or right is not my discussion. My point is everybody's trying to get a piece of you, and we are ambivalent and we're asleep. And we're like the frog that's being boiled to death and we have no idea. Setting aside the fact that we have failed miserably in that same area, in that same segment of entertainment and, what's so-called halal entertainment and so on, media. We have some humble efforts that are being orchestrated around the world, but really compared to what's happening out there, all these values that are not compatible with ours. They're just not compatible with our faith and our system of values and principles. And so, this is why the hadith says, listen to this, that when a believer dies, إِذَا Marital mu'min, as many as the members of the tribes of Rabi'a and Mudar, which were two of the biggest tribes in the Arabian Peninsula, which had, membership upwards of say 50, 60,000 people, the hadith says that when a believer dies, as many as people in the tribes of Rabi'a and Mudar, as many demons will become unemployed. In other words, you have 50, 60,000 different demons and Satans all trying to distract you, trying to deviate you, trying to take a piece of your soul. Whereas when the believer dies, they'll all disperse and go find other targets, other people. Everybody's trying to get a piece of you. And here we are thinking, oh no, why get married now? I still have my college degree to finish. I still have this, that, and the other. Ambivalent to the fact that every single day, brothers and sisters, we expose ourselves to deadly spiritual germs and microbes. Every single day we expose ourselves to all of these erroneous ideas and values. Every single day. So what better than to immunize yourself? What better than to protect yourself? And whatever you want to do as a single person, you can do as two people. Nothing could stand in your way. We've seen how successful people have done that. Why don't we ourselves? Anyway. What I wanted to talk about specifically tonight is marital disputes and disagreements and problems which have plagued our society in such a way that divorce rates are skyrocketing, marriage rates are plummeting, because young people see all the divorcees out there and they say, you know what, I don't want this, I don't want the heartache, I don't want the pain, I don't want the misery, so you know what, I'm happy where I am right now. And so this is causing a bit of a crisis, brothers and sisters, and we need to address it. We need to talk about it. I know it's the eve of the 9th of Muharram, but it's important because, as I said last night, what marriage does is create an environment that's conducive for good moral children to grow up in, so that those children become your greatest investment. Remember the hadith when Prophet Isa alayhi salam, ala nabiyina wa alihi, afdalu salati wa azka salam, was walking, and he came across a grave. Isa, remember, could speak to the dead, he could speak to animals, he could raise the dead. So as he passed through this valley with this grave, he noticed that the person was being tormented. He wasn't a good man, and so he was being tormented, he was being tortured in his grave. So he passed through the valley, came back the next year. When he came by this time, he noticed that the person was no longer in torment. He was all right. He was in fact in bliss and paradise. So Isa said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ayyuh, what happened to this person? I mean, he's dead. So it's not like you did something and so you lifted the torment from him. What exactly happened to merit the fact that he is now no longer in torment? فَأَوْحَى اللَّهُ تَعَالَى إِلَيْهِ. Prophet Isa alayhi salam received revelation from Allah saying that this man had a young child. Last year when you came, the child was still just a child. Now that child is an adult, he has grown up. فَأَصْلَحَ طَرِيقًا وَآوَى يَتِيمًا. So the child began doing good deeds. The child became charitable. And as an adult, he is now accountable for his actions and is remunerated and rewarded for his good deeds. So because he is now engaged in philanthropic activities like fixing a road for the sake of Allah, sponsoring an orphan for the sake of Allah, contributing to the majlis of Aba Abdullah for the sake of whatever it is, Allah said to him, because of that we have forgiven the father. Brothers and sisters, may Allah give you a long and prosperous and healthy life. But one day, we're all going to die. Your degree won't matter, your career won't matter, your social status won't matter, your money, your investments, none of those things will matter anymore, right? The only thing that can and will help you is having good moral children. And so, if we're going to make that investment, and I said this last night, it's the most important investment in your entire life, to bring good moral children. By the way, let me mention something parenthetically, which again, some people had raised some questions about last night. If this is, by the way, with all due respect, I'm not judging here, but I think it's a demonic misconception, a demonic fallacy that says, which is better, quantity or quality? So surely everybody's going to say, well, quality is more important. So instead of having 5 kids who are not, quite there, let's just have one child and focus all of our energy and attention on that child, and we're good, and we end up with quality as opposed to just quantity, as opposed to adding the numbers. And the response to that is this. The reason I said it's a demonic misconception is because on paper, it sounds okay. It sounds pretty legit, as they say. But in reality, this is a misconception. In other words, it's a fallacy. There's something wrong with this argument. Let me explain using this example. If you're a good speaker, unlike me, you are a good speaker, mashallah, you can preach the message of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt, and you're sitting on the minbar, would you want only 5 really high quality, high caliber listeners? Or would you want as many people as possible so you could spread the message as far and wide as possible? If you're let's say for example, a pilot, would you want only like 5 business class passengers in your plane? Or do you want to fill up the plane because you're putting in all the work anyway? You might as well have as many people as possible. The fact of the matter is that if you're a good parent, if you abide by the principles of parenting in a moral Islamic fashion, then it doesn't matter how many children you have, because they're not all going to come all at the same time. They're not all going to, be dangled from the sky, all 6 or 7 of them. What's going to happen is they come in succession. They come one after the other. And if you do your job properly, brothers and my dear sisters, if you do your job as a good parent, which is first and foremost, what is the job of a parent? Is to be a good role model. Is not to try and convince them to be good kids, but show them what it means to be a good kid. Show them what it means to be a moral, ethical, righteous, God-fearing, pious person. Right? Lead by example. That's why the Prophet says in the first 7 years, you don't tell them what to do, because you're supposed to lead by example. And if you do that with all of your children, then it's not about how many hours you spend on them. It's about just being yourself in their presence. Whether it's 2 kids watching and observing your every move and being good people by following your example, or 12 of them, it doesn't matter. It's the same amount of energy, the same amount of effort that you put in. I hope I've convinced you all to do exactly that. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'll take that as a yes. Now, so in order for this to happen, in order for these children to flourish and to prosper and to turn into these good, upstanding citizens, if you like, and followers of the Ahlul Bayt, you need a good family environment. So, tonight, I'm going to try, in the remainder of the time that's available to me, to provide humble, brotherly advice to both the sisters as well as the brothers. Think of it as whispers in the ear of the husband and the wife. In other words, I will say things that are exclusively applicable to the husbands and things that have to do with the sisters. And again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm only here to convey the words and traditions and examples and the lifestyles of the Ahlul Bayt. As for the brothers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Rum, خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. The very basis and foundation of the family and the marriage is to have what the Quran refers to as sukoon, which means peace, right? What a wife primarily needs from her husband is a sense of security, a sense of peace, right? This is critical, brothers, because if a husband becomes abusive and violent, the wife will never be able to find peace in that household, under that roof. It's critical that you aim for that word, the word sukoon, peace, calm. And because of that, it's critical that you don't treat your wife and children in a manner that is aggressive in any way, shape, or form. You know, people, especially non-Muslims and people who have misgivings about Islam and Islamophobes in general, they'll always cite the verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَضْرِبُوهُنْ, beat them, as a final recourse. The Quran describes a situation where beating a wife is merited, beating a wife is acceptable, or that is how they portray it anyway. And my response to anyone who brings this up is always the same thing. I tell them, listen, as followers of the school of the Ahlul Bayt, we follow not just the Quran, but what else? The Ahlul Bayt. The Holy Prophet said over and over again, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمُ الثَّقَلَيْنِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَتِي أَهْلَ بَيْتِي مَا إِن تَمَسَّكْتُم بِهِمَا لن تضلوا بعدي أبدا وقد نبأني اللطيف الخبير أنهما لن يفترقا حتى يرد علي الحوض. The Prophet says, follow the two weighty things. Together, they will guide you. If you follow only one of them, there's going to be an imbalance. I've mentioned this example before. Some of you might have heard it from me. The oxygen atom, when the molecule contains only one oxygen atom, it's called monatomic oxygen. And that is in fact a poisonous substance. If you breathe it, it poisons you. It's dangerous, right? If you have 3 oxygen atoms, that's what we also call ozone. Triatomic oxygen is what you have in the ozone layer. And triatomic oxygen is also poisonous. And it's the dew you see on leaves sometimes in the early morning, right? But if you breathe it in large quantities, it's poisonous. The only time oxygen is beneficial and critical for sustaining life is when you have 2 oxygen atoms. Not 3, not 1, but 2 weighty things, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. If you separate them, you ruin the equation. If you add anything to them, you ruin the equation. If you add something like philosophy, as in Greek philosophy, or even so-called Islamic philosophy, you ruin the equation. You're adding something to the formula that's not required. The Prophet said, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. And if you divide them, if you subtract them, you do the exact same thing. What you get is the diabolical cancer that's called ISIS and terrorism in the name of Islam. Because when the Ahlul Bayt were cast aside, the Quran became a very malleable book that is open to interpretation. The Quran became something that you can twist and turn and slice and dice whichever way you want. And you could use it to justify the most heinous acts that mankind has ever seen. They used the Quran to kill Imam Hussain on the day of Ashura. So, my response to people who say wife beating this, that, and the other about the Quran is, look, you have to take the other side of the equation. You have to look at the Ahlul Bayt. And I challenge you, I dare you, I stand to be challenged tonight that one of you can bring me a single instant where the Prophet or the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt ever laid a hand on one of their wives. In fact, bring me an example where any of the members of the Ahlul Bayt ever treated their wives with any disrespect, with any aggression of any kind. In fact, I was reading a hadith where Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, كانت لأبي زوجة. My father had a wife, كانت تؤذيه, and she always used to hurt him. فكان يعفو عنها, and he'd always forgive her. 3 members of the Ahlul Bayt were murdered by their wives. They were literally killed by their own spouses. And yet, not a single moment, not a single instant where they laid a hand on their wives. So whatever the verse of the Quran is talking about, we don't see it reflected in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. So don't you dare use that verse to justify your aggression and your insecurities and your problems. Am I right? So, number 1, brothers, try and provide an environment that is safe, that brings peace. Number 2, listen to these hadiths. The Holy Prophet says that إِذَا سقى رجل امرأته ماء أجر. Even these simple things, I mentioned last night that how you brush your teeth is prescribed in our religion. The Prophet says a man should every once in a while give her a drink of water. Sometimes you might say this is weird, but there are men who are like, no, I'm not the one who brings you water. You're the one who does that for me. I'm not supposed to do any of this. But if she's thirsty, go get her a glass of water. The Prophet says you are rewarded if you do that. 2, the Holy Prophet says that a man is recommended أن يرفع اللقمة إلى في زوجته, that a man would feed his wife, put the bite in her mouth. Cheesy, yes. Corny, yes. Romantic, absolutely. That's how Islam wants us to be. Number 3, the Holy Prophet says, listen, he says that if a man goes to the market, فَيَحْمِلُ إِلَىٰ عِيَالِهِ تُحْفَةً, and when he goes back home, he brings them something. Tuhfa is a generic term. It means present, gift, fruit, whatever, right? A bundle of flowers, whatever it is, something that's nice. Tuhfa, in Farsi and Arabic we use the same word. If a man does that and comes back home and gives it to his family, the Prophet says, that is like a person who takes a bunch of food and delivers it to the most disenfranchised and the poorest in society. Meaning that you are literally rewarded as though you are doing a charity, an act of charity. Then the Prophet says, فَلْيَبْدَأْ بِالْإِنَاثِ قَبْلَ الذُّكُورِ, and by the way, he should start with the girls before the boys. And the traditions that talk about the honor and respect that a father should provide and show towards his girls are mind-boggling, brothers. They're mind-boggling. Always begin with the girls. Even if the girl's like 16 and the boy's only 2 and he's like the sweetheart of the whole household, the Prophet says, start with the girls. And there are so many other narrations. Brothers and sisters, what we find in many cases of people coming to seek marriage counseling and ultimately asking for the marriage to be annulled, for the union to be divorced, is that husbands, not always, but sometimes we have husbands whose conduct and whose decorum and demeanor with their friends and their co-workers and anyone who's a total stranger on the street is beautiful. But as soon as they step into the home, it's like a tyrant who wants to devour the peasants who are under his subjugation. Like someone who wants to inflict vengeance on them. Like someone who wants to hurt his wife because she said something to him a while back, or because he doesn't like her parents and what have you. Why? You've all heard the story of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. I don't know if you haven't, I'll mention it. Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was a companion of Rasulullah who was injured in battle. He didn't die on the battlefield, but he was injured and brought back only to then pass away, which means that he is technically a martyr, a shaheed. The Holy Prophet participated in his funeral ceremony. The Holy Prophet, in fact, oversaw and supervised the washing of the body and all of these technicalities and ceremonies that you do. Imagine Rasulullah himself. Imagine if a marja participated in the funeral of one of your loved ones, or your funeral, for example. This isn't a marja, this is Rasulullah. And then after that, when the funeral began, all Muslims, Sunni, Shia, everyone narrates the story because it was such a big deal. The Prophet walked in his funeral and he would move from one side of the casket to the other side, and then to the front, and then to the back. So when they asked him, Ya Rasulullah, why are you rotating? Why are you doing this? He said, because I can see the Archangel Jibreel on one side, Israel on the other side, Israfil on the other side. So some big commotion is happening in the cosmos and the heavens, that this man, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, has passed away. These angels are coming down to hold his casket. Then Rasulullah went all the way to the grave. Then before they lowered the body into the grave, Rasulullah said, stop. And then he himself went into the grave and began scaffolding the inside of the grave, fixing it up, taking some mud, fix this crack, fix that side. Everybody's waiting outside like, what's going on? Then Rasulullah came back outside after a while. One of the companions who was audacious said to him, Ya Rasulullah, what are you doing? I mean, it's just a grave and this is just a dead body that's going to decompose in a couple of days. Who cares what the inside of the grave looks like? And that's when Rasulullah made his famous declaration, which should be a lesson to all of us. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ عَبْدًا أَنْ إِذَا عَمِلَ عَمَلًا أَتْقَنَهُ. Allah loves a person who, when they strive or try to do something, they perfect it. They do it with perfection. Whatever it is that you do, which unfortunately is one of those values that as Muslims we've lost. This is a core Islamic value. Perfection, integrity, honesty, all of these things. After this whole thing, when they brought the body down and buried it in the grave and covered the grave, filled the grave, Sa'd's mother came, having seen this whole thing. You can imagine how proud she is as a mother. So she came and she pointed to the grave and said to him, Hani'an laka al-jannata ya Sa'd. Congrats to you. Felicitations. Good for you, my son, because you're in paradise today. As soon as she said that, Rasulullah said, La tuhattimi ala Allah al-jannah. Don't be so sure. But Hannah, Ya Rasulullah, this, Sa'd, all of these things that happened and went down, and you're telling me don't be so sure? Why? The Prophet said, لأنه, right now he's in his grave, he's being given such a squeeze, a crush, whether it's spiritual or physical, God only knows, that's going to cause your milk that you nursed him with to ooze out of the tips of his fingers. Ya Rasulullah, why? What did you do? He's a martyr. He's someone you lowered into the grave. The Prophet said, لأنه كان مع أهله خلقا سيئا أو سيء الخلق. Because he had a bad temper when dealing with his families. A bad demeanor with his family. He's a great person, religious, prays, goes to Hajj, does ziyarah, gives charity. But as soon as he steps inside the house, he's a grumpy old man. He's someone that's difficult to please. Brothers and sisters, especially the brothers, let's not be Sa'd. Let's not be one of those people who gets punished for their bad akhlaq. What kind of a household do you expect to build? What kind of children do you expect to raise if the parents are always bickering, always disrespecting each other, always fighting? I don't care who started it. It's the end that matters. It's the environment, it's the toxicity that matters. The fact that when a child sees their parents fighting, that is the most horrific thing that a child could see. They will carry these scars for a very long time. Anyway, those are some whispers for the men. As for the sisters, Zainab bin Jahsh was the Prophet's cousin. She was the daughter of the Prophet's maternal, Prophet's aunt. She was a maternal cousin. And so that means, remember, that her grandfather was who? Abdul Muttalib, Salamullahi alayhi. So she came from the noblest of the houses of Mecca, the greatest tribe in Hijaz. Rasulullah, again going back to something I said earlier, introduced Zainab bin Jahsh, his own cousin, to a man who was good, was a nice religious person, but he was poor. And he came from an unknown tribe. Like he was a nobody, as you would say, in this day and age, in this culture. But he was a good man, he prayed to God. His name was Zayd ibn Haritha. Zayd is the only companion who is mentioned by name in the Quran. No other companion is mentioned by name. Some companions are mentioned by reference. Some negative, some positive, some in a sort of confusing way where it's actually negative, but they say, oh no, being in the cave and all that was a positive thing. Let's move on. This one is mentioned by name. Again, he was a good man. So the Prophet introduced the two of them and had them get married. Unfortunately, their marriage didn't go down too well. Why? Zayd had his own issues. I'm not blaming it all on Zainab bin Jahsh. But Zainab, historians say, had two problems. Problem number one, because she came from a noble family, because she came from the prophetic family tree that traces its roots back to all the prophets of God, she was a very arrogant person. Arrogant, again, I'm not trying to insult her, but arrogant as you would be arrogant if you were in that position. And she'd always be telling him, you're a nobody, your family isn't important, and yet my grandfather is Abdul Muttalib, the prophet is my cousin, who the hell are you? And of course these things always come up when there is a fight, when there is a disagreement. All these bottled up ideas, all these thoughts that people have, they will only surface when there is an actual fight. That was her first problem, arrogance. Second problem was that she always hurt him with her tongue. You know how there are people out there whose tongue is simply not under their control. And while we're at it, brothers and sisters, especially my dear sisters, let me say this. Be very careful what you say, especially in the context of marriage. Be extra conservative of what you express in the context of perhaps giving your opinion and your views about other people's marriages. I don't care if you're the mother-in-law. One of the biggest problems that causes marriages to disintegrate and to fall apart is the intervention of in-laws. And I ask my dear father-in-laws, mother-in-laws, and everybody who's considered an in-law to please stay out of the issues that a couple may have. You can provide your guidance, you can share your wisdom, you can give suggestions perhaps, and that's fine. But do not get involved in the nitty-gritty details of this young couple's lives, because you will ruin it, because you will create antagonisms and resentments, and you're going to cause issues that will never be erased from their memory. How many times have you heard a woman who's about to get a divorce who says, your mother-in-law said to me 25 years ago on our wedding night such and such? Let's be very careful. And I've always said that especially the in-laws need to take a step back. Even if you see something you don't like, try to reserve yourself. Try not to express yourself too overtly. If you have advice to give, maybe get someone else. Maybe get a friend to deliver the advice. Don't be the one to do that, because these quickly turn into resentments. They quickly turn into fires that you can't extinguish. And especially if you see someone whose marriage is in trouble. I have had the chance to sit through many marriage counseling sessions, which are nothing short of pain and torture. They're so difficult to deal with these cases. But I've had my share of experience. And what happens is, the wife would come and she'd start talking about her problems and why her husband is the worst person on the face of the planet. The husband would do the same thing with his wife. And I try sometimes when they say things expecting some validation from me. You know how when they say, oh, my husband's like this and that and he did this. What they're hoping to get from you is validation. What they're hoping to get isn't just sympathy, but for you to tell them that you're right, he's wrong. Yes, what you did was right. That's what friends do, unfortunately. Friends are now not truthful people for the most part. Friends are just there to support their friend and to root for their friend no matter what position they're taking, right? So when I hear those things, and I know that my validation will matter and it can and will be used against me in a court of law, it will be used in their own arguments, I try not to even nod, brothers and sisters. Because when you nod, it's like saying, yes, you're right. Be careful what you say. If someone comes to you and says, someone proposed to our daughter, and we'd like to ask you about that individual, be careful what you say. Every word, every letter, every syllable that comes out of your mouth will affect the life of God knows how many people. If your word causes this marriage not to fall through, can you imagine the consequences in the grand scheme of things? An entire lineage will be destroyed or never see the light of day because of something you said which wasn't quite accurate. Be careful, and if you're unsure, be quiet. Anyway, so Zainab bin Jahsh had this problem. She would say things to hurt her husband. And so Rasulullah took his side. even though she was her cousin. Rasulullah. Eventually they got divorced, things didn't work out between them. But my point is, this is a critical point. If you get married from a family that is wealthier, richer, and so forth, then you should expect this kind of behavior to surface at some point. Let me share a few hadiths with you. My own words are worthless. It's the words of the Ahlul Bayt that matter. مَثَلُ أَهْلِ بَيْتِي كَسَفِينَةِ نُوحٍ, the Prophet says. The example of my household is like the Ark of Nuh. The Ark of Nuh was the only vessel that survived. Anyone who boarded it survived. Anyone who didn't perished forever. مَثَلُ أَهْلِ بَيْتِي كَسَفِينَةِ نُوحٍ مَنْ رَكِبَهَا نَجَا وَمَنْ تَخَلَّفَ عَنْهَا غَرِقَ وَهَوَى. It's the words of the Ahlul Bayt that matter. If you do not board the ship, you end up losing. So the Prophet says, مَلْعُونَةٌ مَلْعُونَةٌ, cursed, and he says it twice, is a woman who uses her tongue to hurt her husband, who uses her speech to inflict pain on him. Another hadith says that a woman who overburdens her husband, has too much expectations from him. Get me this and get me that, and I want to compare myself to the Joneses and whatnot, is also someone who is cursed. By the way, cursed means that she will be cast out of the mercy of Allah. We want the mercy of God. We don't want to be cast out. The last thing we want is for us and our lineage and our children to be cast out. Of course, I'm not even talking about the obligatory rights of a husband and wife. That has to do with jurisprudence. What the husband is supposed to provide for his wife. A lot of women say, subhanAllah, they've all learned because some genius decided to spill the beans. Every single sister now says, oh, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to work. In fact, if I do anything, I'm entitled to ask for a payment. And, if you don't pay me, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to cook. I don't have to wash the dishes. I don't have to take care of the kids. I don't have to even nurse the children. Right? But look at this side of the equation. Look at this side. Of course you don't. Yes, that's true. And that's your right. But is that the kind of life you want? Is that the kind of marriage you're looking for? Where it's all about my right versus your right? A turf war? A constant battle of dominance? Who gets to be the dominant figure in the family? Is that the kind of family where you expect good moral children to grow in without any sacrifice? Marriage requires sacrifice, brothers and sisters. Which is why I always say to couples, get divorce out of your heads, and now let's sit down and figure out how to fix this. Because as long as you think to yourself divorce is an option, as long as you have an exit strategy, you will never be fully invested in the relationship. Get divorce out of the equation. People are getting divorced for the most pathetic, ridiculous reasons. Get it off the table. Now how can we fix it? Does it take sacrifice? Of course it does. Does it require both parties to sacrifice? Yes, it does. But what if one of them doesn't sacrifice? Well, you be the good one. You be the one who sacrifices for the good of the children. Why? Because Allah will reward you. One hadith says that if a woman is patient with the ill manners and difficult temperament of her husband, أعطاها الله أجر آسيا بنت مزاحم. Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh. I'm not comparing her husbands to Pharaoh. But what I am saying is, Asiya, who became a martyr, whose name is mentioned, whose example, not her name, but whose story is mentioned in the Quran, who is among the highest ranking women in paradise, Allah says, I will give you the reward of Asiya. Because when he says something that hurts you, you don't immediately think, well, how do I respond to hurt him back? Instead of that sort of tit-for-tat conflict, instead of that adversarial relationship, the first thing you ask yourself is, what would God want? Not me. What would God want? And what can I do to ensure that this family stays together, that the children grow up to be good followers of the Ahlul Bayt? Another hadith says that if a woman serves her husband, cooks, cleans, fixes things, does whatever she wants to do in the house as a service to the husband and the children and the family, If she does that for a week, غلق الله عليها سبعة أبواب جهنم. Hell has 7 gates. The hadith says God will shut down all 7 gates of hell so that she wouldn't enter. وفتح عليها ثمانية أبواب الجنة. And Allah opens all 8 gates of paradise before her. تدخل من أي واحدة تشاء. She can enter through whichever of those gates that she wishes and desires. 7 days of service, God says, this is what I've prepared for you. This is what I have ready for you. Another hadith says that if a woman gives a glass of water to her husband, we talked about the other one, the other side. Listen to this side. Over there, the Prophet says that if a husband gives water to his wife, he will be rewarded. But look at what happens on this side. There's a reason, sisters, that there is a hadith by Amir al-Mu'mineen which says, أَكْثَرُ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ النِّسَاءِ. The vast, overwhelming majority of those in paradise, residents of the heavens, are women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you much more than the men. And there is this obvious thing which you see women are just generally more religious, more inclined to the values of the Ahlul Bayt. Anyway, so the hadith says that if a woman gives water to her husband, it is better for her than an entire year's worship. تَقُومُ لَيْلَهَا وَتَصُومُ نَهَارَهَا. Where she spends the entire night of the year in worship and the entire day of every single day of the year in siyam and fasting. Brothers and sisters, I said this a couple of nights ago. Let's forgive and forget. If you're going through marital problems, if you've had your own share of ups and downs in your marriage, just learn to forgive and forget. The hadith says that a man should learn to forgive his wife. The hadith simply says, it's a prophetic hadith, a man should learn to forgive his wife. It's a right of the wife that she is forgiven, she makes a mistake. And we all make mistakes. And it applies to the men as well. So someone comes to the Imam and he says to him, but how many times do I have to forgive her? Like once or twice or 3 times? At what point? Where do I draw the line? At what point do I say enough is enough? The Imam said to him, 70 times a day. In other words, there is no line to be drawn. In other words, no matter what she does, keep forgiving her. No matter what he does, forgive him. Give him a chance. Not just a second chance, but 1,000 chances, because it's worth it. The reward is worth it. Paradise is worth it. Good children is worth it. Inshallah. May Allah bless you all. Honestly, I am deeply, deeply proud and happy when I see all of these young men and women, all of these people who could have been doing 1,000 other things, who could have been at home simply using their smartphones, doing 1,000 sinful acts. But they chose to leave all that behind, to abandon all of that immorality, and to come on board the ark of Abu Abdullah. And if you're in a position where you think, how can I do it? My marriage is difficult. I have problems. Ask Imam Hussain. Ask the Ahlul Bayt. Because they can deliver, inshallah. When you do that, you can then expect to have good children. You can expect to have children who hopefully, by the grace of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt, by the prayers of Imam al-Zaman, brothers and sisters, those children can become among the supporters of the Imam of our time. Imam al-Hussain is heading towards Karbala. As the caravan proceeds further and further, Imam al-Hussain falls asleep for a few seconds. He then wakes up, fastarja. He began saying, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. His son Ali al-Akbar, he said to him, Aba, ma li araka istarja'at. Father, why is it I hear you saying, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un? This is a statement that's usually pronounced when someone faces an affliction, a tragedy. What's happened? So Imam al-Hussain told his beloved son, he said to him, Waladi, إنني نمت فسمعت مناديا يقول القوم يسيرون والمنايا تسير معهم This caravan is moving ahead, but their death is also moving with them, meaning that death is coming very, very shortly. Now listen to what happens when you have a child who was raised with the values and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Ahlul Bayt. Ali al-Akbar says to his father, Aba awalasna ala al-haq? Are we not righteous? Are we not with the truth? The Imam said to him, of course we are. So the Imam Ali al-Akbar responded to his father. He said, إِذَنْ لَا نُبَالِي وَقَعْنَا عَلَى الْمَوْتِ أَوْ وَقَعَ الْمَوْتُ عَلَيْنَا. It doesn't make a difference whether we fall onto death or death falls onto us, because we are righteous, because we know we're on the right path. You know, there's a hadith which Ash-Shaheed al-Thani narrates, very painful. It says, إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا, if Allah truly loves someone, قَبَضَ مِنْهُ أَحَبَّ أَبْنَائِهِ, Allah will take away his most beloved child. Because Allah puts those whom he loves under the biggest trials and the biggest tests. And the biggest test of all, brothers and sisters, is to lose a child. The Prophet Ibrahim was tested through that. Even though his child didn't die, Ismail was eventually not killed, but Ibrahim did put the knife on his son's neck. And because of that, Allah said to him, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ الرُّؤْيَا, you have passed the test. We have made you a Khalil, we have made you God's friend. And so Imam Sadiq is once asked as well. He is asked, what is the most beautiful thing that God has created? The Imam said, a young child who grows up to be a youth that brings honor to his father. And the worst thing that exists in the world, the Imam said, for that child to die. That is the most painful thing. So Imam al-Hussain, Ali al-Akbar for him was the most personal sacrifice in the way of Allah. On the eve of Ashura, Imam Hussain told everyone to leave, including Abbas, Aoun, Abdullah, Ja'far, the children of Aqil, everyone leave! Except Ali al-Akbar. Ali al-Akbar has to die on the plains of Karbala. And so when he came to him, the first person to come and ask permission from among the household of Imam al-Hussain, after the companions had been killed, the companions said to Imam al-Hussain, وَاللَّهِ لَا نَتْرُكُ مَكْرُوهًا يَصِلُ إِلَيْكُمْ مَا دَامَ فِينَا عِرْقًا يَنْبَغِ. As long as there is a single drop of blood in our veins, we shall not allow any evil to reach you. See, they wouldn't even let the children of Abu Abdullah and his family to go to battle. But when they were all killed, the first person to come was Ali al-Akbar. Aba, halli man rukhsa. Would you give me permission to go? Imam al-Hussain would often tell those who came asking for permission not to go. He would be hesitant, he would be reluctant, as he was with Qasim, as he was with others. But when his son Ali al-Akbar came, Imam al-Hussain wanted to give him permission, but he couldn't get himself to say the words. And so instead he simply raised his hands towards the heavens. Allahumma ashhad ala ha'ula'i al-qawm. Oh Allah, bear witness on these people. فَقَدْ بَرَزَ إِلَيْهِمْ غُلَامٌ أَشْبَهُ النَّاسِ خَلْقًا وَخُلُقًا وَمَنْطِقًا بِنَبِيِّكَ. For now a young man has emerged for them who resembles your prophet in his speech, in his demeanor, and in his words and actions. وَكُنَّا إِذَا اشْتَقْنَا إِلَى نَبِيِّكَ نَظَرْنَا إِلَى وَجْهِ هَذَا الْغُلَامِ. And whenever I yearn, remember Imam al-Husain's relationship with his grandfather Rasulullah. The Imam says, whenever we yearn to see your messenger, we would look in the face of Ali al-Akbar. Imam al-Hussain then started crying, tears rolling on his cheeks. كالميزان Ali al-Akbar realized that that is his father's way of saying, you have my blessing, Ali, you have my permission, Ali. So he proceeded to go to the tent. Imam Hussein said, go and bid your family, the women, go bid them farewell. You don't want to go without goodbyes. Ali al-Akbar went inside the tent. It took him a while. He didn't come out for a few minutes. So Imam Hussein went after him. When he entered the tent, he saw him surrounded by Zainab, Sakina, the children of Abu Abdullah, all of them saying, don't go, who will protect us after you? Who will protect Abu Abdullah? Because every time Imam Hussein went into the battlefield, his son was always next to him. Ali al-Akbar would go help his father bring back the bodies of the martyrs. If you go, who is going to help our father? Ali, Ali, Ali. Imam al-Hussein فَاسْتَلَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. He pulled his son Ali al-Akbar. He then went towards the battlefield. Imam al-Hussein called out for Umar ibn Sa'ad, لعنك الله يا عمر بن سعد فقد قطعت رحمي اللهم احبس عنهم قطر السماء امنع عنهم خير الارض. Imam al-Hussein is making these du'as from the bottom of his heart. Oh Allah, do you see what they're doing to me? They're severing my lineage. They're killing my boy Ali. Ali al-Akbar went. He fought with such valor that he reminded everyone of Amir al-Mu'mineen, his father. He fought and fought. Then after a while he came back to his father. Abba, Abata. Inna al-'atasha وحر الحديد قد قتلني. Father, the thirst is killing me. 2 days not drinking a drop of water in the heat of the desert. The thirst is killing me, oh Father. Some say the reason Ali al-Akbar came back to his father was just to give him an assurance that I'm still alive, don't worry about me. Imam al-Hussein cried out loud. Now Imam al-Hussein can't tell his son Ali al-Akbar that there is no water, you are destined to die thirsty. Instead he says this, he says, Marital سيسقيك جدك رسول الله من كأسه الأوفى الذي لا تظمأ بعده أبدا. It's only a matter of minutes and your grandfather the messenger will quench your thirst from his eternal cup, after which you will never feel any thirst. Do you know what Imam Hussein is telling his son? He is saying, son, the only way you can quench your thirst is to die. He's telling him that you will have to be martyred while thirsty. Ali al-Akbar goes back into the battlefield. He fights and fights until one of those vile men says to his friends, Wallah, I shall make his father cry for him. I shall make Hussein grieve over his son. Then he attacked Ali al-Akbar فطعنه برمح في ظهره. He stabbed him with a spear in his back. Then they ambushed him. Another man struck him on the head. the blood started gushing out. Ali al-Akbar placed his head on the horse's neck. It was an Arabian horse. It was trained to take its rider back to where it came from, but the blood covered its eyes. Instead of heading back to Abu Abdullah, Ya Mu'mineen, Ya Mu'aleen, the horse headed in the wrong direction. فَحَمَلُوا عَلَيْهِ مِنْ كُلِّ جَانِبٍ. They attacked him from every angle. They began striking him with their swords. Ali al-Akbar, in his final moments, cried out. He said, "Aba alayka inni salam." Father, peace be upon you. You don't have to worry about my thirst anymore. هذا جدي رسول الله قد سقاني بكأس الأوفى وإنه يقول أن لك كأس المذخورة. He says he has a cup waiting for you as well, Father. فجاءه أبو عبد الله كالصقر المنقضي على فريزته. Abu Abdullah came to his son. He saw Ali al-Akbar lying on the ground. Imam al-Hussain did not get off of the back of the horse. فألقى بنفسه على ولده. He threw himself on his boy Ali. Abu Abdullah sat down. He held his head. He saw blood obstructing his breathing. So he put his finger in his mouth to take out the blood. He then took one breath. وَفَاضَتْ رُوحُهُ الطَّاهِرَةُ. Historians say that Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, he couldn't let go of his son Ali. So first he held him. He wasn't content. Then he put his chest on his chest. He wasn't content. He then lied right next to him while crying out, "Bunayya Ali, Bunayya Ali, ala dunya ba'dak al-afaya." Then Imam al-Hussein went quiet. Zainab thought Hussein had died of grief, so she came outside. "Bunayya Ali, Bunayya Ali." Imam al-Hussein then got up, saying, "Amma ant faqad istarahta min hamm ad-dunya wa ghammiha, wa baqiya abuk li hammiha."